Hello, welcome back to 10 at 10. My name is Michael Ramage. I'm the director of the Cyber Education Research Center here at Murray State University, and welcome back to 10 at 10. 10 at 10 is brought to you through a partnership between Murray State University, Grow West, the Technology Council West Kentucky, KY Innovation, and local partner Sprocket Innovation in Paducah and the Kentucky Innovation Station in Madisonville. This week is episode 185. We are happy to have you back. And this week, thinking about what topics are relevant, what's going on. And in last week in the news, obviously we talked about CrowdStrike. How can you not talk about CrowdStrike and what's going on with them and all the things that in the recovery process, it's going well for some, it's not going well for some. But I thought we'd dig into that a little bit. I'm not going to get in the technical details of what happened. If you're in IT, you know what's happened because you had to recover, particularly if you were a CrowdStrike customer. But I want to get into what can we learn and take away from that. And there's going to be more time to do this in the coming days and weeks and months. But I thought it would be a good time to at least some initial thoughts that what we can learn from the CrowdStrike incident. And not so much that if you're a company like CrowdStrike, although there's a lot of lessons to be learned there too, but as a customer, what can we learn from that? So let me first start off by talking about, at least from my view, I think that CrowdStrike did a few things really well. First of all, I literally woke up at 3:00 in the morning and had, a dozen tweets, messages, emails, whatever about the CrowdStrike outage. So I know that a lot of people got impacted in the middle of the night, worked all night. A lot of friends that are in the tech space that are at MSPs talked about. It was a pizza, work all night kind of situation. But that next morning on the Today Show, the CrowdStrike CEO was on it, taking responsibility, not trying to deflect, not trying to say it was anybody else's problem. They accepted the error. And while that didn't address the fact that there's, airlines were out for however long, I thought it was a nice gesture from them to say, yes, it's us. We own it. We screwed up. They provided a quick fix. I actually, quick fix is a relative term. We'll get into that in a minute, but it was a pretty simple fix to address. You had to do it from get to each computer, but they provided a fix quickly. And sometimes, we have to analyze it and make sure and vet it and do all these things, which perhaps if they had vetted their update a little more, then we wouldn't have been in the situation to begin with. But they did provide a quick fix. So if you were on it and able to get to your computer and update it, you were able to do that pretty quickly. Finally, I actually think they had strong communication. You may not, but they had step by step. Here's what to do. They talked about, they talked about their apology or provided their apologies. They talked about what's next and how to recover. And anyway, I just really think they had strong communication. So I think those three things that they did right. But now let's look at our company. CrowdStrike pushed out an update that interacted with Windows badly and bricked it, gave it the blue screen of death. You had to boot up into safe mode. If you were running BitLocker, then you had some additional issue, and there were a number of steps. But I always think about what if scenarios, and if you go back to even 9/11. Very few people ran what if scenarios of that happening. That was new. That was something that we weren't expecting. It was a horrible incident. And I'm not comparing this to that by any stretch. But what I am trying to say is I don't know that we ran through the what if scenarios of a MSP or not MSP of a security software company updating their software and it bricking our Windows computer. It's a what if scenario that we need to run through, that we need to play through. What if this happens? If you're not a CrowdStrike customer, don't laugh, because that what if could happen to you just as easily as it happened to CrowdStrike scenarios. There's a lot of people that use SolarWinds back in the day, a couple years ago, and had issues. So this what if scenario planning is really important. Whether you do that through a tabletop exercise, whether you do that through real, scenario, or even interruption type testing, that what if scenario I think is really important, and you should do your what if scenario because it really was just inevitable before something like this happened. The second thing I want you to think about is your staffing. So many companies now, and our region is home, and you've heard me say it before, to a lot of managed service providers. The whole point of a managed service provider is for a small company that can't afford to have your own IT staffing, you outsource that. Some MSPs provide really good on-site services and some don't. But the idea is that an MSP has 20 customers, 100 customers, 200 customers, whatever it is, and they share resources between the different organizations. But in this type scenario, you don't have the time to wait for them to get to you. So how are you going to handle this type of scenario, even if it didn't address you, or if it did, how can you recover faster? And what you may want to consider is, first of all, talking with your MSP. What can we do to better support our staffing needs? Or and it's an and or you should add some training to a computer emergency response team on your staff so that team can be prepared to go around and provide those updates. So in this scenario, it was a really easy update to do, but it seems like you needed to touch that computer. You need to be physical access to that computer. So that's going to require staffing. And in an MSP scenario where you're augmenting a lot of that, being able to get to all of those computers is a real challenge. So think about that staffing component. I'm not suggesting at all that you move away from MSPs, because MSPs are great because they're experts. They know what they're doing. They can augment your IT staffing in great ways. But what I am saying is that you need to think about if your MSP is overrun, because I would guess most MSPs were overrun Friday morning last week. How can you do this to accelerate your recovery? This scenario would have been pretty easy for somebody that's not an IT person to be shown, here's what you need to do, go around and do this to each computer. If they had the access, they could have updated, ran the patching pretty quickly. So you could have done that, and that's what I would recommend. And then the last thing on, and I have the headline wrong. These are the things that you should consider, not what CrowdStrike did right, but is to test. And what I mean by that is that we should always test our patch. So if you are in the situation where you're providing an update, much like what CrowdStrike did, if you're providing an update, you should not be put in that situation where CrowdStrike was. You should not put your companies in that situation. So what can we learn? So if you're patching, you should test your patch, test your update. I'm not mad that CrowdStrike updated without permission. There's a zero trust element to that we could consider. I'm not necessarily upset by that. What I am saying is that if we're doing that, and what CrowdStrike should have done, is provided stronger, more rigorous testing before pushing that patch out. What I feel like probably happened is they got in the routine. We do this all the time. It's not a big deal. Let's just push it out. And they did, and it bit them. And the big thing, the big takeaway that I take from this CrowdStrike incident, Delta Airlines is getting raked over the coals right now because of how long it took them to recover. And I don't know the situation with Delta. I'm sure it'll come out and maybe already be out. I just haven't read it. But what it shows is that even if you do everything correctly on your part, a third party situation, a supplier, the supply chain can hurt you and your reputation. So you have to consider that in your strategy. You have to consider that when you're looking at IT, and use this as an opportunity to reassess your strategy. That's what I recommend. Reassess your strategy. Think through what went right, what went wrong, what you can do better, so that next time, if something like this were to happen, that you would be better prepared. You might have done a really good job, but you can always get better. Anyway, I think there's a lot that we can learn from CrowdStrike. It was a very unfortunate event. Hopefully it doesn't ever happen again, but the odds say that something like this will probably happen again. So you want to be ready for it. Thank you very much for joining in today. I'll see you next week back here on 10 to 10. Thank you. Bye.